Hello, everyone. Welcome to Worchester Street. I hope you enjoy your stay. The story this week follows a young engineering student as he explores the remains of the colossal disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. He'll discover abandoned buildings, radiated grounds, and a creature lurking in the darkness. Before we get to that, I have some news for you all. Many of you have heard my story, A Journal Found at the South Pole. I expanded on that short story and fleshed it out into a full novella. It's available now on Amazon. I'm incredibly happy with how it turned out, and if you've enjoyed my work, I think you'll love A Journal Found at the South Pole. The link is in the description. With that being said, let's get started. I'm an engineering student currently studying abroad in Ukraine. I've been interested in the country for a long time, but when I saw HBO's Chernobyl, I knew I had to take the opportunity to check the place out. It's actually not that hard to get into Pripyat, the city with the reactor. I figured if I could see the reactor from one of the abandoned buildings, that'd be enough for me. I went there with Zach and Victor. Zach was an American foreign exchange student like me, and Victor was a native Ukrainian that we'd met in one of our engineering classes. Victor had been to Chernobyl once before and suggested making a trip out of it. Our plan was to drive the few hours to the outskirts of Pripyat, explore the abandoned buildings until sundown, then drive a ways back before setting up our tent in a camping site that Victor knew about. The drive out there passed by uneventfully. Once we arrived, we saw the extent of the abandoned city. This place was huge. We brought Geiger counters with us, so we'd know if we were around any radiation that was too high. Our readings showed elevated levels, but nothing horrifying for the short time we'd be there. My friend Zach is an aspiring photographer, and he took the pictures that you've been seeing of some of the abandoned buildings we explored. It was starting to get late into the evening, so we decided to head back for our car. That's when we got our first clue that something terrible was coming. When we made it back to Victor's car, we discovered its tires had been slashed, all 4 of them. We hadn't seen anyone around all day and had no idea why anyone would do that. The walk back to civilization would take a few hours, and we didn't have cell service. We did have a tent though, so we decided to wait out the night in the city and start walking back in the morning. We gathered up our tent and some food from the car and made our way back into the abandoned buildings. We figured it might rain, and that setting up our tent inside one of the buildings would beat out setting it out in the open. We found a good open spot in one of the more industrial-looking buildings and set up our tent. Zach and I were both shaken from the tires getting slashed, but Victor had already seemed to put it out of his mind. After a short meal, we all climbed into the tent and tried to get some sleep. Laying in my sleeping bag, it seemed that the building was screaming at us. The wind whipped through the wrecked wide-open windows. The entire building seemed to groan and sag with the slightest motion of our bodies. On top of all that, I thought I started to hear moaning, low on the wind. A very real, very human moaning. I got to my feet and grabbed my phone, turning on the flash. Victor and Zach both sat up in their sleeping bags, looking at me. I held my finger to my lips, listening hard. The moaning was coming closer, coming from what seemed to be just down the hall. I stuck my head and arm out of the tent and stared into the darkness, but the pitch blackness was absolute. I tapped the button on my phone to take a picture, and the flash lit up the darkness like a stun grenade. At the end of the hallway, I saw a figure. It was humanoid, but the skin covering its face looked mummified and hung off his skull so loose that I couldn't see his eyes. He was hunched forward like an old man and was holding an axe. Here's that picture that I took. The figure groaned at the sudden flash of light, and I heard his footsteps stumbling away into the darkness. I turned to Zach and Victor, hissing at them to get up. They were staring at me in confusion, but soon got to their feet. Zach made to start taking down the tent, but I whispered that there was no time. We left the building behind, making our way out of the apartment complex and starting through the dark woods towards our car. I kept my phone up, taking the occasional picture to light our way. My skin crawled. I didn't know what to make of the man. Was he a caretaker? Security? Whatever he was, I didn't like the sounds he made, and I didn't think that the way the skin fell from his face was normal. Then, we heard the worst sound. The same moaning from before returned, this time coming from the woods just behind us and to our right. "Run!" I shouted, whirling and taking a picture over my shoulder as I sped down the path. We ran for the last few minutes until we reached our car. Victor unlocked it and we piled in, and he locked the doors behind us. A few minutes passed in silence before I was brave enough to look at the picture I'd taken. Here that is. We spent the rest of the night in Victor's car, taking turns to listen for whatever that thing was. The next morning, we made our way back into town. We asked around, but no one seemed to have any idea what the thing we'd taken a picture of was. I hope you all enjoyed this story, and again, if you've enjoyed any of my work so far, you'll be sure to enjoy my new novella available now on Amazon, link in the description. It currently has a 5-star rating. One reviewer said, quote, "This author has a reading voice like no other. I've been reading their work ever since I stumbled upon their story, A Public Service Announcement, and it has been a wild, deliciously horrifying ride ever since. The journal found at the South Pole made my hair stand on end, and that disturbing feeling of dread wind itself through my core for the entire night. I cannot see what other masterpieces are to come." Another said, "Very engaging storytelling that suits my style so well. This is one of my favorite stories that I've ever worked on, and again, I think you'll really enjoy it." I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon backers. Your support makes my writing possible. These backers include Anima Crackers, Lilith Scyther, Maureen Garcia, Melissa Priolo, Private Castle, Ricky Griffin, and Scar Terrier. Your support makes my writing possible. Again, thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed your time on Worcester Street.